What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for MLB Sunday, August 15th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top DFS picks for today's MLB slate.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay guys, we have a 10-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the pitcher position. So Lucas Giolito, he's in a pretty decent spot here versus the Yankees, but I think I'm gonna pay down at pitcher, save some salary to stack those bats. So I got a couple of low salary or salary saving pitchers for you here. First one is, I like Eduardo Rodriguez with a 2% pitching advantage over a low salary batting team, the Baltimore Orioles. Eduardo Rodriguez, he's giving up a .758 OPS versus righties. He pitches his best ball versus righty batters, and he's facing 7 righties here tonight. Now, the Orioles have hit 25 of his last 83 pitches, so that's a .301 batting average, which isn't a fantastic stat. I would like that to be a little bit lower, but the splits are great here, and he's only 8,000 FanDuel salary. Now, he is 1,800 more on DraftKings, so I love that FanDuel price. Projected at 26.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 28 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 34, 51, and 16 fantasy points in the last 3 games. Now, Vegas does think that there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I think this is a FanDuel play only because you're going to save a bunch of salary on FanDuel. So I like Eduardo Rodriguez on FanDuel here versus the Baltimore Orioles. Okay, the other salary-saving pitcher pick I got for you here, and this applies to both sites. Take a look at Tristan Mckenzie with a 7% pitching advantage over a low-salary batting team, the Detroit Tigers. Now, Tristan Mckenzie, he pitches his best ball versus righty batters and versus switch hitters, only giving up a .615 OPS versus righties and a .564 OPS versus switch hitters, and he's facing 4 righties and 4 switch hitters. He's only facing 1 lefty, which is his weak pitch, so he's got fantastic splits here, and the Tigers have only hit 6 of his last 28 pitches. That's a .214 batting average, and he's only 7,200 FanDuel salary, and he's only 600 more on DraftKings. Projected at 27.3 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 22 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 31 and 28 fantasy points in his last 2 games. Now, Vegas does think there's going to be 9.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under, but you're going to save a ton of salary with this pick. So I like Tristan Mckenzie here versus the Detroit Tigers. Okay, let's take a look at the catcher first base position. I like Matt Olson with a 21% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Colby Allard. Matt Olson is batting 5% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .865 OPS versus lefties, and Colby Allard, he pitches 15% worse to lefties as he does righties, giving up a .799 OPS versus lefties. Now, I like this pick because Matt Olson is 5 for 12, batting a .417 batting average and a 1.334 OPS versus Allard. 2 of those 5 hits are for home runs. He's 4,000 FanDuel salary, 1,700 more on DraftKings, projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 13 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 25, 25, and 10 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Matt Olson here versus Colby Allard. I also like Salvador Perez with a 40% batting advantage over the low salary pitcher J.A. Happ. Salvador Perez is batting 13% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.001 OPS versus lefties, and J.A. Happ, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 26% worse than his pitch to lefties, giving up a .860 OPS versus righties. Now I like this pick because Salvador Perez is 11 for 26, batting a .423 batting average and a 1.461 OPS versus Happ. 5 of those 11 hits are for home runs. So he just absolutely smashes Happ, and he's $3,400 FanDuel salary, $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 11.1 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 9, and 4 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks this is going to be a high-scoring game. 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Salvador Perez here versus J.A. Happ.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the second base position. I like Luis Arias with a 26% batting advantage over Luis Patino. Luis Arias, he's batting 26% better versus righty pitchers, batting a .827 OPS versus righties, and Luis Patino, he's giving up a .755 OPS versus lefties. Now there's no at-bats versus Patino yet, but the reason I like this pick is because Luis Arias is only $2,300 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So a super value play here. He's projected at 11.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 35, 6, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I love this pick as a value play. So I like Luis Arias here versus Luis Patino. I also like Tommy Edmond with a 28% batting advantage over a low-salary pitcher, Kris Bubic. Tommy Edmond is batting 25% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .844 OPS versus lefties. And Kris Bubic, he pitches a .860 OPS versus switch hitters. Now Tommy Edmond is 0 for 1 versus Bubic, but the splits are good, and he's only $2,800 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. Projected at 10 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 9 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 22, 9, and 9 fantasy points in his last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 runs scored in this game, so I like Tommy Edmond here versus Kris Bubic. Okay, let's take a look at the third base position. I got a value play for you here. I like Hanser Alberto with a 47% batting advantage over that low salary pitcher, J.A. Happ. Hanser Alberto bats 20% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .813 OPS versus lefties. And J.A. Happ, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, 26% worse than his other pitches, giving up a .860 OPS versus righties. Now I like this pick because Hanser Alberto is 10 for 24, batting a .417 batting average and a 1.334 OPS versus Happ. Out of those 10 hits, he has 3 doubles and 3 home runs. He's only $2,400 FanDuel salary and only $400 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.5 fantasy points here tonight. Now, he's only averaging 5 fantasy points per game on the season, but he scored 9, 3, and 7 fantasy points in the last 3 games, and he's in a fantastic spot here tonight. Vegas thinks there's going to be 10 runs scored in this game, so I like Hanser Alberto as a value play here versus J.A. Happ. Okay, another value play. I like Rodolfo Castro with an 82% batting advantage over Eric Lauer. Rodolfo Castro is batting 58% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.228 OPS versus lefties. And Eric Lauer, he pitches his worst ball versus switch hitters, 24% worse than his other pitches, giving up a 1.055 OPS versus switch hitters. Now, Rodolfo Castro is 2 for 2 with a 3.5 OPS versus Lauer, and he's only $2,300 FanDuel salary and only $300 more on DraftKings. Projected at 9.6 fantasy points here tonight, he's averaging 7 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 12 fantasy points last game, so I like Rodolfo Castro here versus Eric Lauer. Okay, let's take a look at the shortstop position. I like Tim Anderson with a 20% batting advantage over Nestor Cortes. Tim Anderson is batting 36% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.150 OPS versus lefties, and Nestor Cortes, he's giving up a .946 OPS versus righties. Tim Anderson is 1 for 2 with a 1 OPS versus Cortes. He's $3,500 FanDuel salary and he's $1,800 more on DraftKings. Projected at 10.9 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 6, 35, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Tim Anderson here versus Nestor Cortes. Okay, moving on to the outfield position. I like Nelson Cruz with a 21% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Charlie Barnes. Nelson Cruz is batting 28% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a 1.172 OPS versus lefties, and Charlie Barnes is giving up a .836 OPS versus righties. Now, there's no at-bats versus Barnes yet, and Nelson Cruz is $3,600 FanDuel salary. He's $1,100 more on DraftKings, projected at 12.4 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 0, 28, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Nelson Cruz here versus Charlie Barnes. I also like Hunter Renfroe with a 31% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Keegan Aiken. Hunter Renfroe is batting 21% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .831 OPS versus lefties, and Keegan Aiken, he throws 11% worse to righties as he does lefties, giving up a .840 OPS versus righties. Now, there's no at-bats versus Aiken yet, and Hunter Renfroe is $3,500 FanDuel salary. He's only $300 more on DraftKings, projected at 9.2 fantasy points here tonight, averaging 10 fantasy points per game on the season. He scored 25, 25, and 0 fantasy points in the last 3 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 10.5 runs scored in this game. That's their over-under. So I like Hunter Renfroe here versus Keegan Aiken. I also like Avisail Garcia with a 40% batting advantage over a low salary pitcher, Dylan Peters. Avisail Garcia, he's batting 29% better versus lefty pitchers, batting a .935 OPS versus lefties, and Dylan Peters, he pitches his worst ball versus righty batters, giving up a 1.4 OPS versus righties. There's no at-bats versus Peters yet, and Avisail Garcia is $3,000 FanDuel salary. He's $1,500 more on DraftKings, projected at 8.9 fantasy points here tonight, but he's averaging 11 fantasy points per game on the season, and he scored 28, 0, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Avisail Garcia here versus Dylan Peters.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.